It was the Thursday before Black Friday, and my local Walmart was open late. I went in around 11 p.m. to look for a laptop. By chance, I grabbed the very last one from a Black Friday deal. Almost immediately, a large, filthy-looking man came up to me. He demanded I give it to him, saying he needed it badly. I told him it was the last one, and he instantly became aggressive, yelling in the middle of the store. The guy was clearly unstable. I rushed off with the laptop and got in line while he shouted at me from across the store. A few other customers joked with me to lighten the mood, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something about him wasn't right. When I got home, everyone was already asleep. I sat outside by the pool setting up the laptop. That's when the motion light on the side of the house flicked on. It wasn't unusual. Sometimes animals from the woods next to our yard triggered it, but it still unsettled me. I went back inside, locked up, and continued setting up in the living room. Minutes later, my car alarm went off. It was my Cadillac. I grabbed my keys and stepped onto the porch to shut it off. That's when I noticed a car parked in front of our house. Nobody ever parked there. It stood out immediately. And worse, there was someone sitting inside it. I went back in and locked the door. I told my mom I thought someone outside was watching us. She followed me downstairs to check the peephole. When she looked, she gasped and covered her mouth. I looked for myself and froze. That same man from Walmart was standing right on our front step. The doorknob started to rattle, then heavy pounding shook the door. My mom was on the phone with 911 while my sister cried in the hallway. After a few terrifying moments, the pounding stopped, but before we could calm down, a window shattered from the den downstairs. My mom screamed. I told her and my sister to run upstairs while I locked the den door. I stood there, waiting for him to try breaking it down, but there was nothing, just silence. Then, sirens. Police arrived faster than I could have hoped. When they searched the den, they found the man hiding behind one of our couches. He was arrested immediately, screaming threats as they dragged him out. The officers told us he was likely on drugs and unstable, but that he wouldn't be bothering us again. Still, the thought of him following me home from Walmart, waiting outside, and then breaking into our house, it still makes my skin crawl. It was late, and my roommates and I were starving. They wanted delivery, but I decided to cook homemade burgers instead. That meant a quick run to the only place still open that had everything I needed, Walmart. The lot was nearly empty when I pulled in. I parked up front, ready to get in and out. I was so focused on what I needed that I didn't notice the man until he slammed his shoulder into me at the entrance. No apology, no hesitation, he just pushed past, letting out this strange, muffled laugh as he hurried inside. I brushed it off, figuring he was just some weirdo, and hoped I wouldn't run into him again. But when I reached the produce section, there he was. No cart, no basket, just his phone. He was filming himself taking close-up shots of random fruits and vegetables, snickering to himself. We were the only two people there. I stayed on the opposite side, pretending to look through onions while waiting for him to leave. Every so often, he'd glance up at me. Our eyes would meet for half a second before I'd look away. But each time, it felt heavier, harder to shake off. The last time it happened, I looked down, and when I looked back up, he was right in front of me. His face was inches from mine. Whispered, his breath smelled rotten, his lips curling into a smile. "You're going to get exactly what you deserve," he added before walking off, calling back over his shoulder, "Enjoy your meal." I stood frozen, my hands trembling. When I was sure he was gone, I grabbed what I needed, checked out, and practically ran to my car. Back home, I told my roommates. We laughed it off, chalking it up to some crazy guy. I pushed it out of my mind and made the burgers. An hour later, we ate, cleaned up, and settled in for another movie before heading to bed. But lying in the dark, his face wouldn't leave my head. His words echoed in my ears until I finally drifted into a restless sleep. I woke up to stabbing pain in my stomach. It wasn't a dream. I rolled off the bed, vomiting violently, my body convulsing. Crawling toward my roommate's door, I realized he was sick too. So was the other one. Our apartment was chaos as we all collapsed, convinced we were dying. At the hospital, doctors said it was food poisoning. The burgers were the last thing we'd all eaten. I blamed myself. Even as we recovered, I couldn't shake the guilt. I thought I'd poisoned my own friends. But then the news broke. A man had been arrested for filming himself spraying produce with a mix of pesticide and rat poison at several stores. When his mugshot appeared on the screen, my blood ran cold. It was him. My roommate stopped blaming me after that, but I still can't walk into a grocery store without thinking of him. Because if people like that can poison food right on the shelves, how do you ever know what's safe to eat? I've been the overnight security guy at a Walmart supercenter off the highway near my hometown for about 3 years now. Out of all the jobs I've had, this one isn't bad. Steady pay, decent benefits, and most nights it's just me and another guard camped in the asset protection office, swapping jokes while we keep an eye on the monitors. The inside of the store stays quiet once the doors lock at midnight. Outside, whole different world. You see things after dark in a giant parking lot that most people wouldn't believe. One night, roughly half a year ago, I saw something that's burned into my brain. By then, I wasn't green anymore. I wasn't the type to jump at shadows, but I also wasn't some hero looking for action. My job was simple: keep the building safe, make sure nobody breaks in or sets a dumpster on fire. If something sketchy happened out in the lot and it didn't threaten the store, we usually left it for the cops. We've got cameras everywhere, but once you get to the far edges of the lot, the images turn into fuzz and dark blobs. That shift had been dead quiet. Around 2 a.m., I decided to step outside for a smoke. I've been quitting for years, but boredom on nights like that is worse than nicotine. My coworker stayed inside scrolling on his phone, so I grabbed my jacket and slipped out the emergency exit near auto care, wedging it with a brake. I leaned against the cinder block wall, lit up, and scanned the empty asphalt. A handful of cars sat near the building. Employee rides, maybe an RV someone was sleeping in. Then, out near the edge of the lights, I noticed 2 vehicles parked trunk to trunk, a dark SUV and a dented old sedan. The SUV's hatch was up, and 3 figures were clustered around it. They weren't being rowdy, but the way they kept glancing around made the hair on my arms stand up. Looked like a deal of some sort. I've seen a few of those, usually quick and quiet. 2 of the men hovered by the open trunk, gesturing like they were showing merchandise. The third, closer to the sedan, kept his distance, like he was sizing things up. Hoodies, jeans, hands shoved in pockets. Couldn't make out faces from that far. I figured it was either drugs or maybe stolen gear. I wasn't planning on calling anyone unless I saw a gun. Then, everything changed. The guy who'd been hanging back stepped up to peek into the SUV. One of the others suddenly pulled a cloth sack or bag from behind his back and yanked it over the man's head. Before I could even curse, the second guy lunged, stabbing fast and hard, a blur of jerky movements. It felt unreal, like I'd stumbled onto the set of some crime drama. The victim thrashed for a second, then went limp as they shoved him into the SUV's trunk. My cigarette slipped from my fingers. Instinct screamed at me to move. I sprinted to the door, slammed it shut, and bolted the lock just as tires squealed and the SUV tore off, taillights vanishing into the dark. Inside, my hands shook so badly I could barely explain to my partner what I'd seen. He called 911 while I tried to get my thoughts straight. The whole thing had taken seconds. The officers arrived about 15 minutes later. I gave them every detail I had, which, honestly, wasn't much. 3 guys, 2 vehicles, a bag, a stabbing, and a getaway. No plates, no faces. The footage from our cameras was worthless, just grainy shadows at the edge of the lot. The officers checked the sedan that was still there and took a copy of the video, but there wasn't much else to do. After they left, the office was silent. I kept replaying it. How fast it all went down. How quiet. Whoever that victim was, he probably didn't even know he was in danger until the last second. I kept an eye on the news for a week, waiting for some mention. Nothing. No missing persons alert, no arrests. I still pull overnights at that store, but I don't step outside for smokes anymore. I keep a tin of nicotine pouches in the break room. Every time I pass that exit, I think about that night, about how a normal shift turned into something I'll never unsee.